Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from Gone Legends. In today's video, we'll be highlighting American celebrities who passed away today, and in recent days, along with other notable individuals from around the world. Before we proceed, we kindly ask for your support. If you find these tributes meaningful, please take a moment to like this video. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. And now, let's begin. 1.
Ana Luisa Pelufo passed away on March 4, 2026, at the age of 96 in Tepetitlan de Morelos, Jalisco, Mexico. The exact cause of her death was not publicly disclosed, but her passing marked the end of a long and influential career in Mexican cinema. Ana Luisa Pelufo was born on October 9, 1929, in Querétaro, Mexico. She grew up during the era when Mexican cinema was rising in popularity across Latin America. From an early age, she showed a natural interest in acting and performing. Her journey into the film industry began in 1948, when she appeared in a small role in the Hollywood film Tarzan and the Mermaids. Although it was a minor appearance, it opened the door to many opportunities in the Mexican film industry. During the 1950s, Pelufo became one of the most recognizable actresses in Mexican cinema. She gained widespread attention for her bold performances and confident screen presence. In 1955, she made history by performing what is widely considered one of the first artistic nude scenes in Mexican cinema, breaking social taboos and attracting significant public attention. Over her long career, she appeared in more than 200 films and television productions, including several popular Mexican movies and telenovelas. Ana Luisa Pelufo's dedication and fearless approach to acting helped shape the history of Mexican entertainment, leaving behind a lasting legacy in Latin American film.
2.
Annabelle Schofield passed away on February 28, 2026, at the age of 62 after a battle with cancer. Her passing marked the end of a life that carried her from a quiet town in Wales to the glamorous world of international fashion and Hollywood television. Annabelle Schofield was born on September 4, 1963, in Llanelli, Wales, United Kingdom. Growing up near the Welsh coast, she developed a natural elegance and confidence that would later make her stand out in the fashion industry. During the vibrant fashion era of the 1980s, she moved to London and soon began modeling for major brands, including Yves Saint Laurent and Revlon. Her striking beauty quickly gained international attention. Yet Annabelle wanted more than a modeling career. She moved to New York to study acting and soon transitioned into film and television. One of her most recognizable appearances came in the legendary television series Dallas, where she played Laurel Ellis in 1988. The show's global popularity introduced her to millions of viewers. Later in life, Schofield explored writing and film production, showing her creativity beyond the screen. Her life was a journey of transformation and artistic courage. Though she is gone, Annabelle Schofield's elegance and determination remain part of her enduring legacy.
3.
John P. Hammond passed away on February 28, 2026, at the age of 83. While the exact cause of death was not publicly confirmed, the world lost one of the most respected blues musicians of his generation. John Paul Hammond was born on November 13, 1942, in New York City, United States. Music surrounded him from childhood. His father, John H. Hammond, was a legendary music producer who discovered icons like Billie Holiday and Bob Dylan. Despite this famous connection, Hammond built his own identity through the timeless sound of the blues. Inspired by legends like Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters, he dedicated his life to preserving the authentic spirit of traditional blues music. Armed with his guitar and a powerful voice, Hammond became known for deeply emotional performances. Over a career spanning more than 5 decades, he released numerous albums and toured extensively across the world. In 2011, he won a Grammy Award for Best Traditional Blues Album, a recognition of his lifelong dedication to the genre. Even in his later years, Hammond continued performing, determined to keep the blues alive for future generations. John P. Hammond's legacy is not just in his music, but in the passion with which he preserved one of America's most powerful musical traditions.
4.
Neil Sedaka passed away on February 27, 2026, at the age of 86 following a sudden medical emergency. His death brought sadness to fans around the world who had grown up listening to his timeless songs. Neil Sedaka was born on March 13, 1939, in Brooklyn, New York, United States. From a young age, his extraordinary musical talent was clear. He began piano lessons early and later attended the prestigious Juilliard School's preparatory program. Although classically trained, Sedaka found his true voice in pop music. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, he became one of the most beloved singers and songwriters of his era. Working with lyricist Howard Greenfield, he created unforgettable hits including Oh Carol, Calendar Girl, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, and Laughter in the Rain. When musical trends shifted in the late 1960s, Sedaka experienced a decline in popularity. But he made an incredible comeback in the 1970s with the support of Elton John's Rocket Records label. Throughout his career, Sedaka sold millions of records and became a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. His melodies continue to inspire listeners around the world, ensuring that his music will never fade from memory.
5.
Sonny Gibbs passed away in February 2026 at the age of 86. The exact cause of his death was not publicly disclosed, but his passing marked the loss of a player who helped shape the early years of professional American football. Sonny Gibbs was born in 1939 in the United States and developed a passion for football during a time when the sport was rapidly growing in popularity. From a young age, he demonstrated exceptional athletic ability and determination. During his college career, Gibbs emerged as a talented quarterback, known for his strong arm and leadership on the field. His performance eventually led him into professional football. He played in the National Football League, spending time with teams such as the Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions. These were formative years for the NFL, when the league was expanding and becoming a major part of American culture. Players like Sonny Gibbs helped build the foundation of the modern game. His dedication, discipline, and competitive spirit represented the values that define professional sports. After retiring from football, Gibbs remained respected within the football community. Though he is gone, his contribution to the history of American football remains part of the sport's legacy.
6.
Devonta Lee passed away on February 26, 2026, at the age of 26 after a courageous battle with osteosarcoma, a rare and aggressive form of bone cancer. His death brought deep sorrow to the American college football community, where he had once been known as a determined young athlete with great potential. Devonta Darrell Lee was born on December 28, 1999, in Fluker, Louisiana, United States. Growing up in a small town where football was more than just a sport, Lee quickly developed a passion for the game. His natural strength, athleticism, and determination made him stand out during his high school years at Amite High School, where he became one of the most promising football prospects in Louisiana. Because of his impressive performances, Lee earned recognition as a four-star recruit, attracting attention from several major college football programs. In 2019, he joined Louisiana State University, LSU, and became part of the historic LSU Tigers team that won the College Football National Championship that same year. Later, Lee transferred to Louisiana Tech University to continue his football journey. However, persistent pain during training eventually led doctors to discover a devastating diagnosis: bone cancer. Despite undergoing surgeries and intense treatments, Lee faced his illness with remarkable courage. Even during his toughest moments, he remained positive and hopeful. Devonta Lee's life may have been brief, but his determination and bravery continue to inspire those who knew his story.
7.
Bobby J. Brown passed away on February 25, 2026, at the age of 78. The exact cause of his death has not been publicly confirmed, but his passing quietly marked the loss of a performer who dedicated much of his life to the world of film and television. Bobby J. Brown was born in the United States, where he developed a deep interest in storytelling and performance from a young age. Acting requires patience, discipline, and resilience, and Brown carried these qualities throughout his career. Over the years, He appeared in various film and television productions, building a reputation as a dependable and hard-working actor. While he may not have always been in the spotlight as a leading star, performers like Brown play an essential role in shaping the stories audiences watch on screen. Every production relies on talented supporting actors who bring realism and emotional depth to the narrative. Brown contributed to that creative process, helping transform scripts into living stories that audiences could connect with. Those who worked alongside him often described him as passionate about his craft and deeply committed to performance. His career reflected the dedication of many artists who spend their lives working within the entertainment industry. Though Bobby J. Brown may not have sought fame, his work remains part of the broader legacy of film and television storytelling.
8.
Roscoe Robinson passed away on February 26, 2026, in Birmingham, Alabama, at the age of 97. His passing marked the end of a long and remarkable life devoted to gospel and soul music. Roscoe Robinson was born on May 22, 1928, in Dermott, Arkansas, United States. From a young age, music became an essential part of his life, particularly within the traditions of gospel singing in church. His powerful and emotional voice quickly earned attention among gospel performers. Robinson began his musical career in the 1950s, performing with gospel groups such as the Five Trumpets and the Highway QCs. These groups played an important role in the gospel quartet tradition, a style of music deeply rooted in African American church culture. During the 1960s, Robinson expanded his musical style into soul music, gaining wider recognition with songs like "That's Enough," which reached the U.S. rhythm and blues charts. His music blended the spiritual depth of gospel with the powerful rhythm of soul, creating a sound that resonated with many listeners. Later in his life, Robinson returned primarily to gospel music, continuing to perform and record well into his later years. His dedication helped preserve a musical tradition that has influenced generations of singers. Roscoe Robinson's voice carried messages of faith, hope, and perseverance, qualities that will continue to echo through his music for years to come.
9.
Gary Walker passed away on March 1, 2026, in Essex, England, at the age of 83 after suffering a stroke. His death marked the end of an important chapter in 1960s pop music and the farewell to the last surviving member of the famous musical trio, the Walker Brothers. Gary Walker was born Gary Leeds on March 9, 1942, in Glendale, California, United States. From a young age, he developed a deep passion for music, especially rhythm and percussion. Growing up during the early rise of rock and roll, he became fascinated with drums and began practicing as a teenager, gradually building the skills that would shape his future career. His professional journey began in the early 1960s when he joined the American rock band, the Standells. Performing with the band allowed him to gain experience, touring and playing live shows, helping him grow as a confident musician. In 1964, his life changed when he teamed up with Scott Walker and John Walker to form the Walker Brothers. Despite the name, the trio were not related, but together they became one of the most successful pop groups of the 1960s. After moving to the United Kingdom, they achieved huge success with orchestral pop hits, including the unforgettable "The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore." Gary Walker's music helped define an era of emotional pop sound that continues to be remembered by fans today.
10.
Nicole Mary Kidman was born in 1967 in Honolulu, Hawaii, but the story people remember was shaped far away from that sunny beginning because her family returned to Australia, and there, in a world that didn't yet know her name, Nicole grew up carrying something that would follow her for years. A deep, almost paralyzing shyness. Not the kind of shyness that looks cute on camera, but the kind that traps your voice inside your chest. The kind that makes you feel like you're watching life through glass, always present but never fully seen. As a child, Nicole wasn't the loudest in the room. She wasn't the one who demanded attention. And in many ways, she was the one who disappeared, until she stepped into performance. Because on stage, she didn't have to be herself. And that was the first time she felt free. But even as she was learning to dream, life began to test her in ways a child should never have to understand. Her home was loving, but it was also demanding. Her father was a respected academic and scientist. Her mother was strong-willed and determined, and the air around Nicole wasn't only about being good. It was about being disciplined, being tough, being someone who could survive the world. And then one of the first heavy blows arrived. Her mother faced serious health struggles, including breast cancer, and for a sensitive young girl, watching the person who made the world feel safe suddenly become fragile was a kind of fear that buries itself deep. Hospitals, worry, the silence of a home where everyone tries to act normal even though nothing feels normal anymore. And Nicole learned early that love can be terrifying because love can be taken away. She started working young, stepping into acting roles as a teenager. And behind that early success was a truth many people forget. She wasn't only chasing a dream. She was chasing stability. She wanted to contribute. She wanted to be strong. And she wanted to prove she could carry her own weight. But the entertainment world can be cold. It can praise you one day and discard you the next. It can make you feel powerful and disposable at the same time. And Nicole began to understand that if she wanted to survive, she couldn't rely on applause. She had to rely on craft. Then came the moment her life shifted into something the world would consume. Hollywood opened its doors, and she didn't just enter the industry, she entered a spectacle. Because in the early 1990s, she became linked with Tom Cruise, one of the biggest stars on the planet. And that marriage didn't simply place her in the spotlight. It locked her inside it. Suddenly, every expression, every movement, every rumor, every whisper became public property. And the world acted as if her private life belonged to them. But the worst moments weren't always public. Some of the deepest pain happened in silence. Nicole's journey with motherhood was not simple. It carried heartbreak and medical struggle and complicated grief. She faced fertility challenges, an experience that can make a person feel isolated, even when surrounded by people. And when you are famous, the cruelty can cut deeper, because strangers comment on things they will never understand. And it is one thing to lose something privately, but it is another thing to lose it while the world watches, speculates, and turns pain into entertainment. And then came another storm that the public still talks about like it was just celebrity news. But for Nicole, it wasn't gossip. It was a fracture. After years of living as part of one of the most photographed couples in entertainment, her marriage ended, the divorce became international headlines, and with it came something even harder than heartbreak: the loss of control over her own narrative. Because when a relationship ends quietly, it hurts. But when it ends under camera flashes, it becomes a performance you never agreed to. And Nicole was suddenly alone in a way most people couldn't understand, trying to rebuild her identity while the world reduced her to a headline. Yet she kept working, choosing difficult roles and dark stories and painful characters, almost as if she was using art to survive what real life was doing to her. Because for Nicole Kidman, acting was never just a career. It was refuge. It was language. It was the place she could turn pain into meaning, but life still wasn't finished testing her. Years later, grief returned with the kind of suddenness that knocks the air out of your chest. Her father, Anthony Kidman, passed away in 2014, and losing a parent doesn't matter how old you are. It can make you feel like a child again, searching for a voice that will never answer. And grief doesn't care if you are famous. It doesn't care if the world thinks you are strong. It finds you anyway. And it changes the way you breathe. So when we speak of Nicole Kidman's legacy, we cannot begin with glamour. We have to begin where her story truly starts, with fear, with heartbreak, with pressure, with the pain of losing parts of life she wanted to protect. And yet she did not disappear. She transformed, because sometimes the most powerful people aren't born powerful. They become powerful by surviving what could have destroyed them. By the time Nicole Kidman began stepping seriously into acting, she wasn't chasing attention. She was chasing air. Because when you grow up feeling too quiet for the room, Performance becomes a kind of oxygen, a place where the heartbeat finally sounds loud enough to matter. And in Australia, long before Hollywood ever learned to pronounce her name with awe, Nicole was already building herself from the inside out, role by role, scene by scene, like someone stitching courage into their own skin. She trained with discipline, not because she was forced to, but because she needed to, because talent alone is fragile, and she could feel how quickly the world can close its doors. So she learned to work harder than people expected. She studied, she rehearsed, she watched the great performers, and she fought against the voice in her head that whispered she wasn't enough, because that voice is the first enemy many artists face, and Nicole faced it early. Her first professional steps came while she was still young, appearing on Australian television and film in the early 1980s. And those projects did not come wrapped in luxury. They came with long hours, modest budgets, and the constant pressure of proving she belonged, because the industry often treats young actresses like they are temporary, like they are replaceable, like their dreams are a phase. And Nicole understood quickly that if she wanted to survive, she would have to make herself unforgettable. The Australian public began noticing her presence, not as a passing face, but as a performer who could carry emotion without shouting it, someone who could let silence speak. And that ability became her signature, because Nicole's power was never about being the loudest, it was about being deepest. And one of the moments that pushed her closer to national recognition came through intense work on television, where she learned the discipline of long-form storytelling, the kind that teaches an actor how to sustain pain, tension, tenderness, and transformation over time, not just for one scene, but for an entire journey. Then came a turning point that felt like a door swinging open into danger, because the role that introduced Nicole Kidman to a much wider world demanded fear, demanded survival, demanded a kind of rawness that cannot be faked. And that was the 1989 psychological thriller Dead Calm, a film where the ocean was not just scenery, it was a trap. It was isolation. It was the idea that help can be miles away when you need it most. And Nicole played a woman forced to confront terror with nothing but her will to live. In that performance, people saw something that couldn't be taught, a tension in her eyes, a realism in her panic, a vulnerability that never turned weak. And suddenly, critics and industry insiders outside Australia began to pay attention, because Hollywood loves the next big thing, but it respects the rare actor who can make you feel something real. And Nicole made people feel real fear, real heartbreak, real strength. And that's when Hollywood came calling. Not gently, not patiently, but with the hunger of an industry that wants new faces to place into its machine. And when Nicole stepped into that world, she stepped into a place that can either swallow you whole or build you into a myth. And in 1990, she was cast in Days of Thunder, a glossy, high-speed film that placed her beside Tom Cruise at the height of his fame. And just like that, Nicole's life split into two realities: the actress and the headline, the artist and the spectacle, the woman and the world's opinion. It is difficult to explain how heavy that kind of sudden attention can be, because it doesn't only follow you to premieres, it follows you to airports, restaurants, private conversations, and it follows you into your mind. Because when millions of strangers are watching, you begin to feel as if you are always being evaluated, always being graded, always being measured. And Nicole, who had spent her youth learning how to find confidence, now had to find it again in a place far louder and far more invasive than anything she had ever known. People looked at her and saw beauty first, and that is often the curse of a beautiful actress, because the world can become obsessed with the surface and ignore the depth beneath it. And Nicole fought against that quietly, role by role, decision by decision, because she didn't want to be a decoration in someone else's story. She wanted to be the story. She wanted to prove that behind the glamour was craft, and behind the craft was someone who understood pain, endurance, and truth. Through the early 1990s, she took roles that were not always safe, not always easy, sometimes romantic, but always chosen with a sense of purpose, because she was shaping her identity in real time, and even when her marriage became the center of public Fascination. Nicole kept trying to protect something sacred: her work, her ability to disappear into characters, her right to be more than a public fantasy. But even as her career grew, there were moments where the world's pressure tried to squeeze the life out of her. Because the more famous she became, the more people believed they owned her story, and in that space, a person can lose themselves. You begin to live in fragments. You become a face that belongs to magazines, a rumor that belongs to strangers, a symbol that belongs to everyone except you. And Nicole began to realize that survival in Hollywood wasn't only about talent, it was about boundaries. It was about protecting your spirit in a place designed to consume it. She kept returning to the work like a lifeline, because acting allowed her to express emotions she could not express in public. It allowed her to be messy, furious, grieving, desperate, fearless, and alive. And the deeper she went into her craft, the clearer her path became. She wasn't here to be famous. She was here to be great, and greatness demands risk. As the decade moved forward, she chose projects that pushed her beyond the comfortable image people wanted to trap her inside. And she began proving, again and again, that she could carry complex stories, that she could balance tenderness with intensity, that she could make audiences believe in her suffering, her love, her rage, her hope. And by the late 1990s, she had become something far more powerful than a celebrity wife or a glamorous newcomer. She had become an artist with gravity. And that is where Part 2 ends, at the edge of a new chapter. Because the next phase of Nicole Kidman's life is where the world begins to understand what she has been building all along. Not a career made of luck, but a legacy carved from pressure, pain, and relentless discipline. And soon she will take roles that will shock audiences, break hearts, and finally silence anyone who ever underestimated her. By the late 1990s, Nicole Kidman had something many people chase their entire lives and never touch: global fame, a glamorous image, and a place in the center of Hollywood's spotlight. But fame is not the same as peace. And for Nicole, the brighter the spotlight became, the more it exposed what she was trying to hold together, because sometimes the world applauds you at the exact moment your private life is falling apart. On the outside, she looked untouchable. She walked red carpets with a controlled elegance, spoke carefully in interviews, smiled for cameras as if she had mastered the art of being unbreakable. But behind that image lived a reality the public didn't fully understand, a life where every decision felt watched, every emotion felt judged, and every personal struggle had the potential to become tomorrow's headline. This was also the era where Nicole began making choices that signaled something important. She was no longer interested in being safe. She wanted roles that cut deeper, roles that carried darkness, complexity, and danger, because she had learned something about herself. She could survive discomfort. She could live inside difficult emotions without flinching. And she could use that ability to create performances that felt painfully real. In 1999, she stepped into one of the most discussed films of her career, Eyes Wide Shut, directed by the legendary Stanley Kubrick, a filmmaker known for demanding perfection, for pushing actors into psychological territory where the line between character and person can blur. And Nicole, working act alongside Tom Cruise again, entered a world of tension and intimacy that felt like a mirror held up to human desire, jealousy, and the fragile lies that hold relationships together. The film's production was famously intense, long, and emotionally exhausting. And whether people loved the film or were unsettled by it, one thing was clear: Nicole wasn't afraid to expose vulnerability on screen. She wasn't afraid to let the audience see discomfort, uncertainty, and emotional truth. And that willingness began to separate her from many of her peers, because not everyone is brave enough to be unflattering. Not everyone is brave enough to be raw. But while she was pushing boundaries in her work, life outside the screen was becoming heavier, and the pressure of being part of one of the world's most scrutinized marriages did not disappear just because she was talented. Because talent cannot protect you from loneliness, and celebrity cannot protect you from pain. Nicole's experience with motherhood and fertility struggles became one of the quiet battles of her life. a kind of suffering that can feel invisible even to the people closest to you. Because it's not always something you can explain without breaking down. And for a woman constantly photographed and analyzed, those private battles can feel even more isolating, because the world expects you to sparkle even when you're quietly grieving what you hoped would happen, what you prayed would happen, what you thought might be your future. And then came the moment that changed everything. The fracture that turned an entire era of her life into a before and after. Her marriage ended, and it ended publicly, loudly, and painfully, becoming a global spectacle as the divorce made headlines around the world. For outsiders, celebrity divorces can look like drama, like gossip, like entertainment. But for the person living it, divorce is often a kind of death. It is the death of the life you thought you were building, the death of routines, the death of promises, the death of certainty. And when that death is broadcast to millions, it becomes something even more brutal, because you don't get to grieve quietly. You don't get to fall apart without strangers forming opinions about your tears. Nicole was forced to keep moving, forced to keep showing up, and forced to keep being Nicole Kidman when she may have wanted to be just Nicole, a woman trying to survive heartbreak without turning it into a performance. But she did what strong people often do when they are cornered by life. She poured herself into work, and that work became the place where she rebuilt. Not overnight, not easily, but piece by piece. This period after the divorce became one of the most important transformations of her entire career. Because sometimes pain doesn't just break you. Sometimes it strips you down until only your truth remains. And Nicole's truth was this. She was not here to be someone's glamorous partner. She was here to be one of the greatest actors of her generation. In 2001, she delivered a performance that felt like a burst of color and tragedy. Moulin Rouge, a film that demanded not only acting but singing, dancing, romance, comedy, and heartbreak, all in one whirlwind, and Nicole stepped into the role of Satine like a woman possessed by emotion. She was luminous, fragile, aching, and powerful. A dream wrapped in glitter that slowly turns into nightmare, and audiences across the world felt it, because Satine's story wasn't just about love, it was about the cruel truth that sometimes the most beautiful things in life don't last long. Nicole's performance in Moulin Rouge was a statement, a declaration that she could be theatrical and intimate at the same time, that she could carry a grand cinematic fantasy while still making it human. And when the award's attention arrived, it wasn't just recognition, it was proof that she had stepped into a new level of artistry, one earned through risk and relentless work. But she didn't stop there, because Nicole was not chasing one big moment. She was chasing legacy. And in 2001, she also starred in The Others, a gothic, haunting film where she played a mother trapped in fear and uncertainty. And once again, she showed the world that she could carry an entire film with quiet intensity, making tension feel like something you could touch in the air. Then came the role that would change how Hollywood saw her forever. In 2002, Nicole took on The Hours, and with it, she took on Virginia Woolf, one of the most complex and fragile literary minds in history. And Nicole didn't approach the role like a star. She approached it like a student, like a craftsman, like someone willing to disappear completely. She altered her appearance, but more importantly, she altered her energy, her voice, her posture, the way she held sadness like it was a permanent weight on her chest. Her performance was not loud. It was not flashy. It was the kind of acting that creeps into your bones, the kind that makes you forget you're watching Nicole Kidman at all, because you are watching a woman struggling to breathe under the pressure of her own mind. And for that performance, Nicole Kidman won the Academy Award for Best Actress. It was a moment that felt like a crown being placed on a survivor, not just a performer, because she had walked through public heartbreak, private grief, and relentless scrutiny, and she had turned all of it into art that made the world stop and listen. And yet, even with an Oscar in her hands, Nicole's story was not one of complete victory, because awards do not erase pain, and success does not heal old wounds automatically. It simply gives you a different stage to stand on while you're still learning how to carry your past. But something had changed. She was no longer being defined by anyone else. She was defining herself. She was becoming the kind of artist who could take the darkest parts of life and shape them into something meaningful, something beautiful, something that could help other people feel seen. And that is where part 3 ends, at the moment she reaches the mountaintop and realizes the climb has changed her, not into a flawless person, but into a stronger one. And next, we'll move into the years where she must balance new love, motherhood, public expectations, and the weight of being a living icon while still chasing roles that demand everything from her. Winning an Oscar can look like the end of a story, like a final scene where the hero stands in the light and everything suddenly makes sense. But for Nicole Kidman, that golden statue was not a finish line. It was a turning point, because the years that followed were not about celebrating forever. They were about learning how to live again, how to love again, how to trust the future after it had already taught her how quickly everything can break. In the early 2000s, Nicole was carrying 2 heavy realities at once. She was one of the most admired actresses in the world, and yet she was also a woman still healing from public heartbreak, still carrying private grief, still learning how to step into rooms without feeling the echoes of what she had lost, because fame cannot protect you from memories, and it cannot protect you from the quiet moments when the world goes silent and you are left alone with yourself. During this time, she kept choosing challenging roles, not because she wanted to prove anything anymore, but because difficult characters felt honest to her, because she understood suffering in a way that made her acting feel less like performance and more like truth, and the audience could sense that. They didn't just watch her, they felt her. She worked steadily, moving through projects that stretched her in different directions, dramas that demanded restraint, thrillers that demanded intensity, stories that demanded emotional precision. And each time she appeared, she carried herself with a kind of discipline that felt almost sacred, like she was honoring something bigger than fame, like she was honoring the craft itself. But behind the screen, her personal life was evolving, and evolving is not always gentle. After a marriage that had defined a decade of her public identity, Nicole had to rebuild her private identity with care, because starting again is not romantic in real life. It is terrifying, it is lonely, it is waking up and realizing the future is blank, and you are the one who has to write it. Then, in the middle of that rebuilding, love arrived again. Not in the loud, explosive way the media expects, but in a way that felt like stability, like a hand reaching out in the dark, and that love came through Keith Urban, a country music star who carried his own struggles, his own battles, and his own history with addiction. Their connection became public, of course, because nothing in Nicole's life stays private for long. But what mattered was what happened behind closed doors. A relationship built not on perfect fairy tale illusions, but on real human honesty. The kind that says, I know what pain is too, and I'm still here. Nicole and Keith married in 2006, and for many people watching from the outside, it looked like redemption, like a fresh chapter after heartbreak. But for Nicole, it was more complicated than that. Because entering a new marriage after a public divorce means carrying fear into love. It means wondering when the next collapse will come. It means learning how to trust again when life has already proven it can betray you. And soon after, life tested that new love in a way that could have shattered it. Keith Urban entered rehab for alcoholism not long after they married. And think about the weight of that moment, because Nicole had already lived through a marriage that ended in global headlines. She had already watched her private life become public property. And now she was facing another crisis, one that could have become another story for the world to consume, another narrative written by strangers. But this time she stayed. Not for the cameras, not for image, but because she believed in the human being beside her. Nicole has spoken about that period as one of the hardest, because addiction doesn't only affect the person battling it, it affects everyone who loves them. It brings fear, it brings uncertainty, it brings nights where you don't know what tomorrow will look like. And for a woman who had already survived so much instability it could have reopened every wound. Yet she endured, and that endurance became part of her identity. Not the glamorous endurance people romanticize, but the real kind. The kind where you choose to stay present, even when you are afraid. Where you choose commitment, even when it's heavy. Where you choose hope, even when life has taught you not to. And while her family life was being tested, she continued to work, because Nicole has always been the kind of artist who doesn't disappear when life gets hard. She turns toward the work. She channels the chaos into performances that feel layered and alive, and in those years, she built a filmography filled with variety, playing women trapped in different forms of conflict, women fighting for themselves, women breaking, women rebuilding, women surviving. Motherhood also returned to her life in a new way. And for someone who had faced fertility struggles and complicated emotions around becoming a parent, this chapter carried deep meaning because in 2008 she welcomed her daughter Sunday Rose, and later her daughter Faith Margaret was born via surrogacy in 2010. And for Nicole, those moments were not just joyful. They were healing. Because sometimes life gives you something after years of waiting. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't erase the pain, but it gives the pain a new shape. It gives it purpose. It gives it a softer ending. Through all of it, she was still being watched, still being analyzed, still being judged, and yet she moved with quiet control, as if she had learned that you cannot stop the world from talking, but you can decide who you are anyway. You can decide who you are anyway. You can decide what matters anyway, and Nicole decided that her work would remain her anchor. The industry, too, was shifting because Hollywood loves youth, and it often tries to erase women as they age, but Nicole refused to be erased. She didn't chase relevance by becoming smaller. She chased relevance by becoming deeper, choosing roles with complexity and power, proving that she wasn't just surviving in Hollywood, she was shaping it. And that is where Part 4 ends, not with a perfect ending, but with something more meaningful. With a woman rebuilding her life in real time, balancing love and fear, motherhood and memory, fame and privacy, and still walking forward with the kind of strength that doesn't need applause to exist. There comes a moment in every long career when the world starts to assume it already knows you. When people believe your story has been completed, like a book placed back on the shelf, admired, remembered, and then forgotten as something newer appears. But Nicole Kidman refused to live like a finished story because she wasn't built to simply maintain fame. She was built to evolve. And the years after rebuilding her personal life became the years where she sharpened her legacy into something stronger than stardom. Hollywood has a quiet cruelty, especially toward women, because it often rewards youth as if youth is the only form of beauty, and it treats aging like a weakening instead of a deepening. But Nicole's career became a rejection of that cruelty because she kept choosing roles that demanded emotional strength, roles that were uncomfortable, roles that forced audiences to look at women as complete human beings, not just as images. She continued to move between different worlds of storytelling, big films and intimate dramas, polished productions and raw character studies. And when she stepped into roles, she brought something that felt unmistakable, a kind of lived-in intensity, like someone who has known grief and still walks forward anyway, because Nicole's performances were never purely technical. They carried history. They carried scars. They carried memory. As the years passed, she became more than an actress. She became a producer, shaping stories from behind the scenes, choosing projects that mattered, pushing narratives that Hollywood often avoided, especially stories centered on women's experiences, women's trauma, women's resilience. And she began to influence not just what people watched, but what the industry was willing to make. Then came the era where something unexpected happened. Television, once considered smaller than film for major movie stars, began transforming into a new space for deep storytelling. And Nicole didn't resist that shift. She embraced it because she could feel what television was becoming. A place where character could unfold slowly, where pain could be explored without rushing, where a story could breathe. And when she stepped into television at full force, she didn't come quietly. She came with a performance that would change how audiences saw her again. In 2017, Nicole starred in Big Little Lies, playing Celeste Wright, a woman who looks perfect from the outside, elegant, educated, wealthy, composed. But behind that polished image is a life filled with fear, manipulation, and violence. And Nicole didn't treat the role like entertainment. She treated it like testimony. Her performance as Celeste was devastating because it showed the invisible reality of abuse, the way a victim can be trapped not only by the abuser, but by shame, by confusion, by the belief that no one will understand, by the fear that leaving will destroy everything. And Nicole played that reality with brutal honesty, showing the audience how trauma lives in the body, how it changes the way someone flinches, the way they breathe, the way they hold their own arms as if trying to protect themselves from the world. Big Little Lies was not just successful, it became a cultural moment, and Nicole's performance earned major awards and enormous respect. But beyond the trophies, it carried a deeper impact. It forced conversations about domestic violence into the mainstream, and it reminded the world that even the most perfect lives can hide unbearable suffering. And this role felt even more powerful. Because Nicole wasn't acting from a place of distance, she understood what it means to be watched while hurting. She understood what it means to carry pain while the world expects you to smile. And that understanding gave the character a haunting realism that stayed with viewers long after the credits rolled. After Big Little Lies, Nicole's career entered a new kind of momentum. Not the momentum of a young star rising, but the momentum of an established artist proving she can still surprise the world, still dominate, still take risks, and she began appearing in projects at a pace that felt almost relentless, as if she was refusing to let time slow her down. She worked across genres, across platforms, across storytelling styles, proving that she could be intimate one moment and epic the next. And she continued choosing roles that explored human fragility, addiction, grief, motherhood, fear, ambition, and survival, themes that mirrored the complexities of real life rather than the fantasies Hollywood often sells. But while her professional life surged, grief quietly returned again, because in 2014, her father, Nicole Kidman, passed away, and even though years had gone by, even though she had built a new life, even though she had experienced great success, losing a parent carries a particular kind of emptiness, because it is not only losing a person, it is losing the version of yourself that existed when they were alive. It is realizing that certain conversations will never happen again, certain advice will never be given again, certain doors are closed forever. Nicole continued working through that grief because that is what she has always done. She turns pain into motion. She turns loss into work. She turns heartbreak into a performance that makes other people feel less alone. And there is a quiet heroism in that, not because it looks dramatic, but because it is the slow, private decision to keep moving when life gives you reasons to stop. By this stage of her life, Nicole Kidman had become something rare. A star who was still hungry for challenge, still willing to be seen as imperfect, still willing to go to dark places on screen in order to tell the truth. And the truth is never comfortable. The truth is messy. The truth is often painful. But Nicole has built her career on the belief that truth is what lasts. And that is where Part 5 ends. At the point where Nicole's reinvention becomes undeniable, where she proves that survival is not her final form. Transformation is, and next, we will move into the later chapter of her career, where she becomes not only a performer, but a symbol of endurance. A woman who keeps reshaping the industry while carrying the weight of everything she has lived through. In Hollywood, there is an invisible countdown placed on women. A quiet timer nobody admits exists. A timer that suggests a woman's value fades as she grows older, that her relevance shrinks as younger faces arrive. But Nicole Kidman spent her life proving that countdown is a lie, because instead of shrinking, she expanded, and instead of fading, she became sharper, more daring, more essential, like a flame that burns brighter the longer it survives the wind. As the streaming era rose, the industry changed again. and some stars clung to the past, hoping the old rules would protect them. But Nicole moved with the future because she understood something. The platforms may change, the screens may shrink or grow, but a powerful story is still a powerful story, and a fierce performance still leaves scars on the heart. So she worked again and again, almost relentlessly, appearing in films and limited series with a pace that shocked even her admirers, and people began asking how she did it, how she carried so many roles, so many characters, so many heavy emotional worlds, and the answer wasn't mystery. It was discipline. It was obsession with craft. It was the same hunger she had as a shy girl in Australia who once believed her voice might never be heard. Nicole's modern career became a showcase of range, not the superficial kind of range that simply changes costumes, but the deep kind that changes the soul of a character. And she began choosing roles that explored complicated power dynamics, maternal devotion, grief, guilt, desire, identity, and psychological fracture, stories where women were not simple heroes or villains, but contradictions, because real people are contradictions. And Nicole has always been drawn to what is human, not what is neat. She also deepened her role as a producer, shaping the kinds of projects she wanted to see in the world. And this matters because in an industry that often sidelines women, producing is not just business, it is control. It is the ability to decide which stories matter, which voices are heard, which truths are allowed onto the screen, and Nicole used that power not to build vanity projects, but to build work that carried weight. She became known for taking on characters who live with hidden suffering, women who look composed but are quietly unraveling, women who love fiercely yet fear the cost of love, women who are trapped in systems, families, expectations, and inner demons, and she played them with a precision that made audiences uncomfortable in the best way, because discomfort can be a doorway to empathy. This era of her life also revealed something beautiful. Nicole Kidman was not afraid of the word work. She didn't chase luxury as her identity. She chased purpose. And even when the roles were exhausting, even when the subject matter was dark, she kept going. Because acting for Nicole has never been about pretending to be someone else. It has been about understanding humanity more deeply, and understanding humanity requires courage. But while she was building this modern dominance, she remained a person carrying an old truth that life can change in a single phone call, in a single moment, in a single loss. And that awareness is part of what makes her performances feel haunted, because she knows what it is to lose stability, to lose certainty, to lose people. And when she plays grief, it doesn't feel like acting. It feels like memory. Nicole's public image, too, evolved into something more complex than glamour, because she became a symbol of endurance. And endurance is not pretty. Endurance is showing up when you are tired. Endurance is showing up when you are tired. Endurance is smiling when you want to cry. Endurance is doing the work even when your heart feels heavy. And Nicole's career at this stage looked like the career of someone who had learned to survive the impossible and keep creating anyway. She also became known for supporting the craft of filmmaking itself, speaking openly about the importance of cinema, of theaters, of shared storytelling, reminding audiences that film is not only entertainment, it is ritual, it is culture. It is one of the few places where strangers sit together in the dark and feel the same emotions at the same time, and her voice in that conversation mattered, because she wasn't speaking as a casual observer, she was speaking as someone who had given her life to this art. Through her humanitarian work, she continued advocating for women, for safety, for dignity, for equality, carrying her influence beyond acting, because she understood that visibility is a form of power, and power can be used for something more meaningful than applause. And while she never presented herself as perfect, she consistently chose to show up for causes that mattered, reinforcing the idea that legacy is not only what you create, but also what you stand for. Yet even with all her success, Nicole's life remained human, filled with ordinary fears that never fully disappear. The fear of losing someone, the fear of failing, The fear of not being enough. The fear of not being enough. The unpursued, and perhaps that is why she still connects so deeply with audiences, because she doesn't perform like a distant goddess. She performs like a person who has been broken and rebuilt, a person who has danced that strength is not the absence of pain, it is the decision not to be ruled by it. And that is where part 6 ends, with Nicole standing as a bridge between eras, between the old Hollywood that once tried to define her through romance and headlines, and the new world that recognizes her as a powerhouse, a producer, a storyteller, a survivor. And next, we will move into the emotional heart of her legacy, what she means to audiences, what she has changed in the industry, and why her story continues to matter even now, because she is not a gone legend, she is a living one, and living legends have a different kind of weight, because their story is still unfolding. There are celebrities the world remembers because they were famous, because they were everywhere, because they were loud enough to be impossible to ignore. And then there are artists the world remembers because they made people feel something real, because they reached into the private places we hide from each other and brought those feelings into the light. And Nicole Kidman belongs to that second kind of legacy, the kind that doesn't fade when trends change, because it is built on emotion, built on truth, built on the quiet bravery of showing up fully human. Nicole's legacy is not simply a list of awards, even though she has earned them. And it is not simply a collection of iconic roles. Even though she has created many, her legacy is the way she makes pain visible without turning it into spectacle. The way she can play a woman breaking apart and still make her beautiful in the most human way. The way she can hold grief in her eyes so gently that the audience feels like they are looking at their own memories reflected back at them. Because Nicole Kidman has never been the kind of performer who hides behind technique. She uses technique, yes, but she doesn't rely on it to protect her. She uses it like a knife, carving deeper into the character until something raw appears, something true, something that makes the viewer uncomfortable and grateful at the same time. Because we don't always want the truth, but we need it. When you look at the women she has played across decades, you begin to see a pattern that feels almost like a confession. Mothers who are terrified of failing their children. Wives trapped inside relationships that look perfect on the outside, but are rotting inside. Women carrying trauma quietly, because the world expects them to be composed. Women who love so deeply it becomes dangerous. Women who are strong not because they are fearless, but because they continue even while fear is burning in their throat. And perhaps the reason Nicole plays these women so convincingly is because she has lived close to the edge of those emotions in her own life, not in the exact same circumstances, but in the universal ways that make pain familiar. She knows what it means to be watched while hurting. She knows what it means to be watched while hurting. She knows what it means to rebuild after losing something that once defined you. She knows what it means to live with uncertainty, and that knowledge is not something you can fake. It leaks through the eyes. It shapes the pauses between words. It changes the way someone breathes on screen. Nicole Kidman's legacy also lives in how she changed the conversation about what a leading woman can be. Because for decades, the industry tried to trap women inside narrow boxes. The innocent, the seductive, the supportive, the tragic, the decorative, and Nicole broke those boxes by refusing to stay inside them. She played women who are complicated, sometimes unlikable, sometimes deeply flawed, sometimes morally messy, and she did it without apology because she understood that complexity is not a weakness, it is realism. She also became an example of endurance for women who watched her and recognized something beyond the glamour. Women who saw her survive a public divorce and still stand tall. Women who saw her keep working while being judged. Women who saw her choose roles that were difficult instead of easy. Women who saw her build a family again after life had already taken pieces away. And that kind of endurance is inspiring because it feels achievable. It feels human. It feels like a reminder that collapse is not the end of a story. It can be the beginning of a stronger chapter. Nicole's presence in cinema and television has also helped prove that audiences do not only want youth, they want truth, they want depth, they want performances that feel like mirrors. And by continuing to take powerful roles as she matured, she pushed against Hollywood's fear of aging, showing that an actress does not expire, she evolves, and her evolution became a quiet rebellion. A statement that women's stories do not end when society expects them to. They become richer, darker, more layered, more meaningful, and beyond the screen, her legacy is connected to what she stands for, her advocacy for women's rights, her public support for issues like domestic violence awareness, her willingness to use fame as a platform for something bigger than herself. Because when you have visibility, you can either protect it selfishly, or you can turn it into a light for others. And Nicole has often chosen the second path, not with loud self-promotion, but with consistent presence, as if she understands that real change is not made by one speech, it is made by showing up again and again. But legacy is not always something you feel in headlines. Sometimes you feel it in silence. In the way an audience goes quiet during a scene where Nicole's character is trying not to cry. In the way people later describe her performances not as entertainment, but as something they went through, because that is what powerful acting does. It doesn't just distract you, it takes you somewhere. And Nicole's best work takes you into emotional territory that feels like life itself. Even her voice, her pacing, the delicate way she delivers dialogue, the way she allows moments to breathe, has become part of her signature because she understands that drama is not always in shouting. Sometimes drama is in restraint, in what a character refuses to say, in the way pain is swallowed, in the way a smile trembles. And Nicole has mastered that language so completely that she can break hearts with a glance. And that is why, when people speak her name, they don't only speak of beauty, they speak of strength. And they don't only speak of fame, they speak of craft. And they don't only speak of success, they speak of survival. Because Nicole Kidman's legacy is not a straight road. It is a path that bends. Through storms, through reinvention, through grief, through love, through relentless work.